a lot of reasons that we see young voters expressing both uncertainty about whether they would turn out and also who they would vote for. So I think there's a couple of contextual situations that are unique to the current moment, and then also other factors that we should consider. So contextually right now, I think young voters are leading the national cry for a more robust and engaging and widespread platform from Democrats. You know, it's pretty clear, survey after survey, young voters lean Democrat, but they're also among the most likely to say that they're not sure if they will turn out to vote. And at least in some of my personal discussions with young voters at protests throughout the summer following the murder of George Floyd, a lot of kids did indicate to me that they just felt like there wasn't enough representation policy-wise or descriptively on the ballot. And they did not feel like they were being included in the Democratic platform. And I think if you have a look at what the Democratic National Convention did after these protests, you know, we can see that a large number of young voters were in fact ignored and their demands ignored. It would not take a lot for Joe Biden, for instance, to advocate for and openly campaign on, for instance, like a higher minimum wage, you know, which is something that a lot of these young voters want. And it doesn't have to be, of course, defund the police, right? There doesn't need to be as many contentious issues that separate these two groups. So I think situationally, you know, there's something happening where there's much more of an appeal being made to moderate Americans, you know, or moderate Republicans rather, than are being made, I think, to young voters. And I think that's not lost on young voters. And the second reason I think is also very important is that we need to highlight that young people are very interested in politics. You know, they talk about politics, they're tweeting about it, they're writing about it, they're showing up in person, they're engaging about it. They have, you know, politics takes up a large proportion of the discussions they have with their friends. But political information is costly to attain, and political habits to form they're costly as well. And we haven't exactly made it easy for young voters to get that information. We need to think about the costs, right? Think about all these students right now who are being kicked out of their dorms, you know, who don't have addresses to register at. You know, those of us who are working to register students to vote right now, you know, we're living in the privilege of our own homes, but these kids they're changing addresses maybe 2-3 times before the registration deadline. And so just getting access to, you know, a ballot is hard for them. And I think these are things that we're overlooking as a country right now.
Yeah, so I think I would also start with a little bit of background before we understand, you know, the maybe structural challenges to voting among young people. We know we saw an uptick of voting in 2018, the midterm elections, over where young people were voting in 2014. It was like a double-digit increase over those 4 years. And, you know, we can describe whatever kind of motivations we want. I mean, I think Trump certainly played a role in the spike in turnout in that year that led to a lot of Democratic victories in the House. But I think when we look at 2020 and the youth vote, I think neither candidate, both septuagenarians, are not overwhelmingly well thought of among young people. And you just look at their policy platforms, and Joe Biden's is significantly to the left of where he was while he served as Obama's VP. I think that's largely because of a more vocal and organized progressive movement that is being charged by people of color and younger voters. So we are seeing some influence, but I think as a pollster, someone who does a lot of, you know, constructs a lot of questions trying to get at some of this stuff, I think it's important to realize that I would agree that, you know, young people are politically engaged in a lot of different ways. And I think sometimes we don't measure that as accurately as we could. We use a lot of these older measures of, like, you know, did you, you know, contact a representative? Did you donate money, again, which young people have much less of. But if you ask questions about, are you participating in political discussions online, you see a lot more activity, and it paints, I think, a significantly different picture And we haven't made voting necessarily all that easy for folks. When you ask folks about how difficult it will be to vote in the 2020 election, I think more than half of when people say it's going to be pretty difficult. And I think, part of that is the challenge of getting information, the registration process, and every state has their own rules. So I think it is more complicated probably than it needs to be.
I think you're absolutely right. We have students who are saying, we're getting mailers in the mail. We thought we registered, we did all the things, and now we're getting more mailers saying, have you registered? And they're coming from, official election authorities, and now we're confused. Are we registered? Are we not registered? And I think there's just a lot of confusion that's presenting to first-time voters. And if they don't know that there are resources where they can go check online to see if they're registered to vote, or they don't know that they can contact their county clerk or whatever it may be, they just become, I think, disenchanted by how taxing and how complicated this process is. And I think, there has to be a way to disseminate this information to them in a way that simplifies it, and makes it accessible. But, this is by design. Our electoral process is by design. It's designed to keep some people in, and it's designed to keep some people out.